We didn't grow up knowing what executive function skills were. Life felt overwhelming. Managing time, staying organized, and feeling stuck made everything difficult. What we didn't realize was that we lacked the skills to plan, prioritize, and break goals into manageable steps. After years of trial and error, we've seen how powerful executive function skills can be. With expert interviews, real stories, and practical strategies, this podcast is the resource we wish we had. Whether you're a student, parent, or professional, we're here to help you unlock your potential. Welcome to the Executive Function for All podcast. Today we're joined by Ali Schroer, a licensed clinical social worker and therapist who brings a unique perspective as both a former classroom teacher and mental health specialist. In this episode, Ali helps us untangle the overlapping symptoms of ADHD, anxiety, and executive function challenges. She shares some of her approaches to support children in building emotional and regulation tools. Ali is wonderful to talk to, and I really think you'll enjoy her perspectives. Let's begin. Ali, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
You bet. I'm happy to be here.
So you have such a unique background that I wanted to jump into. You've been a teacher, you've been a social worker, you do a lot of work in the therapeutic world, you do work with high achieving professionals. How has all this shaped your way of looking at mental health?
That's a great question. I would say the eclectic background certainly gives me a broad lens of how mental health affects people. Because I think about, mental health is something that all of us have, right? But how you handle it, how you take care of it is the same way that I think of physical health, is you have to take care of it. And so when I think about the kind of different avenues that I've gone down professionally and who I've worked with, it is not unique to one segment of the population or one type of client, even for that matter. And so I think kind of the best way I would describe it is that it's pervasive, it's important, and it is kind of all-encompassing of who we are as humans. And so it doesn't really matter if you're like a go-getter, high-achieving professional. Your mental health is really going to be important and significant in your life. If you are a child and you are struggling with your mental health, we got to give you tools in the same way that we would give somebody else. So I think it's unique in that way that, it's something that is truly universal. And I think that that is unique in the same way that physical health is. That there's not many things that hit every single human on the planet.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it's fascinating. One of the core reasons that I wanted to speak to you is because you've been a teacher and coming at it through this executive function lens. You've been a teacher of students with ADHD.
Yep.
And you've been essentially a coach or a therapist for very high achieving professionals with ADHD.
Correct. Yes.
Are there similarities there?
Yeah. The kids that struggle with ADHD, it looks very different, not just on gender, but on age and also cognitive functioning as well. So there's other factors that go into it. But oftentimes we see that it's either hard to focus on something or complete a task, or they get hypervigilant about what they might be doing, but then they kind of miss some of those nuances of an assignment or a project. And we see the same thing with professionals, that somebody could be crushing it in a law firm or a financial firm or even as a doctor, and they might be great at the big picture, but they might be missing some of the details, like entering their billable time, or just like the same way editing a paper when you're a student, right? So what's fascinating about it, I think, is that depending on your environment, your teachers, and how you use the skills and the resources around you, you can make it a long way with figuring out what works for you to kind of get where you need to be, right? When you're a student, if you have good resources, you have good teachers, you use Untapped, you have things that help support you in getting to your goals, you can reach those things. What is hard is that as professionals, oftentimes those supports break down. And so I've seen many times over that somebody may have been fairly successful, especially academically successful, throughout their past, and then they get to their career and they're like, I don't get extended time. I don't get somebody who checks my work. I don't have all these supports in place that really help me navigate this, having some neurodiversity as an adult. And that is different than it is for kids.
There's so many people listening to this in that boat, right? It's almost like this anxiety fueled them through childhood, college. They get this low level anxiety, which builds but it's also really helpful to get things done. What happens when you're a professional when you're just fueled by anxiety?
That's a good question. I mean, anxiety, the positive intent of anxiety is to prepare us. And so as kids, and quite honestly, even as adults, if we use anxiety well, because every single human, it doesn't matter where you live or what language you speak, has a level of anxiety, as we should, because it keeps us physically and psychologically safe. For example, if a tiger was in the room right now, you and I would both have a response to that, as we should. We want some anxiety so that we look both ways before we cross a busy street, right? But it's that it is used with kind of positive intention, and it's used in a helpful manner, right? We say it's an adaptive skill rather than a maladaptive skill. And so then as adults, when anxiety or if anxiety becomes maladaptive and it becomes problematic in your life, then it can absolutely be a hindrance, and it can you become almost paralyzed by it in some ways, right? It's hard to get over it. It's hard to get through it. And so then it kind of changes the landscape. It's no longer used to help inspire you or motivate you. It's used as a hindrance.
Yeah. So what do you do in that situation when you're 25, 35 and beyond, and you know this isn't sustainable? What are common recommendations you give?
Well, I mean, I am a therapist. So there's part of me that says, therapy can and will be helpful for a portion of these people. But generally, outside of people who are really struggling and need individual support as kind of a more pervasive approach, it would be using some coping skills that really help you face your fears and get through your anxiety. Anxiety works about the future. Like, what if this, what if that, what if this, right? It's all future focused. And the nice part about that is then it's very treatable in getting prepared. You can actually support decreasing your anxiety by preparing, and that will help you ward off some of that anxiety. The other thing that I would say is kind of a pervasive treatment plan would be that we want you to face your fears. We want you to be able to come toe to toe in some ways with the stressors that are bringing you anxiety. And that is really the gold standard treatment is exposure therapy, which is, kind of coming to the table about the things that make you nervous or uncomfortable or anxious, coupled with cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a fancy way of saying understanding how you feel and think and act about those triggers. And you can do that without therapy as well.
Interesting. I want to go back to exposure therapy. We know exposure therapy is very helpful. How can parents support that?
That's a great question. So exposure therapy is meant to help you in small incremental ways face the fears that are kind of derailing your life or interfering with your life. So it might be easier to give you an example. So if a adolescent, for example, has a lot of test anxiety and then no longer wants to take tests or wants to take them in a private room and wants to work on them at home or doesn't want to go to school that day, starts feeling sick on the days of tests, right? Really well-intentioned parents and caregivers will sometimes actually create more anxiety by taking away those stressors. So they'll say things like, "No problem, honey. Don't worry. We won't go to school today." Because they see the distress. They see the challenges for their kids. And quite honestly, to your point, parents and caregivers don't want to see loved ones in distress and having a hard time. None of us do, right? I don't think there's a human out there that's like, "Ooh, yeah, let's see you struggle," right? We want to be helpful. We want to encourage people. And so when you see somebody that is having a lot of anxiety about something, whether it's tests or anything else, those caregivers and those parents will, what I say, kind of create a roadblock to facing their fears, to facing their anxiety. And instead, we kind of clear the path. And the image that I use often that sticks with parents and caregivers is that I talk about snowplow parenting. I wish I coined that term. I definitely did not. I don't know who did. But it's the idea that we are clearing the path of all adversity and all challenges out of the way for our children so that they don't have to face those things. The challenge, as you said, Brandon, the challenge with that is one, anxiety grows. And two, that we are then teaching our kids that they are helpless. We are not teaching them about resilience and grit and how to face their fears and how to get through hard things. And we all need some bad weather to make our bark strong. And so if we're the trees won't grow if they don't have wind and rain and all of the elements. And that's the same thing for kids. And for all of us, quite honestly, is that we need some adversity. We need some challenge. We need some struggle. But we need it in a way that we can still feel that we are supported and we are loved. And we can do that without being snowplow parents or caregivers.
The example that comes to mind that we see all the time is the child doesn't want to talk to their teacher, coach, or professor. and role playing with them to give them the skills. Because I think you and I are big on giving kids skills, right? Yeah. But then making sure that they do it and then praising the fact that they did it, not necessarily the outcome.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So what the research says too about anxiety work is that it really is about facing your fears. It actually doesn't matter from the evidence standpoint what the outcome is. So if we give a silly example, maybe somebody has social anxiety and we say, we want you to go over and say hi to that kid, right? That is the exposure, is going over and saying hi to that other kid. If that other kid blows you off, it doesn't matter. If that other kid hugs you and invites you to a party, it doesn't matter. It's really about the ability to face your fear, which is the approach and going over to that person. So the outcome, same with a test, same with being a professional, same with, any of the other stressors that happen to kids with anxiety, is that we actually aren't really very concerned about what happens on the other side of that. We just want you to be able to do the thing and to be brave.
That is such a great example, because I think about myself as a parent in that situation, wanting to comfort my daughter, like, oh, that kid's just a jerk.
Yeah.
And that's not what this is about, no. Right? It's about that you took time and to overcome this fear.
Absolutely. And so to your point of the praise, right? If that were my kid who went over and was anxious to say something to another kid, even say like hi or hello, right? And they did that and the kid blows them off. When my kid comes back to me, I'm not saying that kid sucks, they're the worst, right? Instead, I'm saying, I am sorry that was so hard, but I'm so proud of you. Are you proud of you? Look how brave you were. You just crushed that. I mean, maybe they're just not meant to be your friend, but you crushed that.
That's great.
And then we move it right on. Next topic.
And it's essentially the same thing, whether it's elementary, like young kid like that, all the way through professionals, right?
Absolutely. Yes. And so when you talk about kind of the professionals that I work with, these really high achieving professionals across the globe, many of them I'm still teaching them, like, it's okay if it doesn't go your way. And the question that I ask is, what is the worst that could happen? Many people, many will tell me either they will be homeless, they will die, somebody else will die, they're never going to get into college, their parents are going to hate them, right? It kind of spreads the gamut, but it's really serious consequences. And we have to then challenge that thought. We ask some questions to challenge that thought of like, what are the chances of that? Give me a percentage that that's actually true. It feels true, but is it logically accurate? Maybe not so much.
That you're going to be homeless if this conversation doesn't go well.
That's right.
No, it's funny to say that. I'll often ask parents of teenagers, like, if they don't get into this dream college, what's going to happen? And whenever parents project their kid's future, they always project the kid's current skills.
Yeah.
And so this kid is the exact same middle school as they are at 25, right?
Yes.
But then someone's always homeless and there's always an unplanned pregnancy.
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah,
how did we get there?
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
We just maybe didn't get into a certain college. And so it's hard not to stay there, but I love the approach.
Yeah. And then I essentially walk them out of that because that feels very, very real, right? We're kind of laughing and making light of it. But the reality is those parents believe that and it feels very real. And if I were to laugh when I was talking to a parent as a client, that would not go well, right? And so instead I say, I can appreciate that feels very truthful to you. That is an actual concern that you have, is that your child is going to have an unplanned pregnancy or they are going to become homeless. Let's talk about the reality of that. What have you already safeguarded to ensure that they do not become homeless? How would you support them if that was the path that actually started to come to fruition? Would you step in? Would they be left to their own devices? Do you have savings? Do they know that? Do they have other skills that they could use if they fail out of college or they don't get into that college? Are there alternatives? Let's look to the gray, and that perspective, instead of this black and white feeling, can really open up wonderful conversations, but also lessen that grip of anxiety of that it is supposed to be a certain way.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I know I'm like every other parent, right? Like if my daughter, doesn't get into this, like it may feel very real to me.
Very real. That's right.
Because, we love our children more than anything in the world.
That's right.
And we want the best. And that's scary.
It's very scary. Yes. I mean, your heart is like literally walking around outside of your body. That's how I have 2 kids myself. And that's how I think about it. I send them to school and I'm like, there goes my heart outside my body in 2 directions, right? Like hoping for the best. But I also know that my job, and this is a phrase I've used for a long, long time, my job is to prepare them and not to spare them. And if I can prepare them for life, for sports, for friendship, for loves and losses, I am doing my best. And I am supporting them in the best way. Yeah. But if I'm sparing them of all the adversity and all the challenges and all the angsts and all the heartbreak that they will have, I'm not setting them up for success.
It's just going to build.
it's going to build and they are going to feel helpless and anxious. And we know that.
Yeah. That's not our opinion.
That's the research talking.
Yeah, that's been well documented.
Yeah.
So a lot of families, when they have a child struggling, it's hard to figure out what it is, and everything seems to overlap, right?
Yeah.
So the one we hear all the time is, is this ADHD?
Mm-hmm.
Is this anxiety? Is this depression? Walk me through, let's say, a middle school student, how you would untangle this and think about this.
That's a complex question. It's a good question because it is one that so many families have. So from a clinical lens, if someone came into my office with that, which is often the case, they're like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but my kiddo needs some support. There are absolutely evidence-based measures that I use to rule things out and to get data and information first and foremost. Documented measures that I have that look at specifically anxiety and anxiety diagnoses, specifically depression and depression diagnoses, and ADHD and ADHD diagnoses. And so oftentimes, if that is kind of the starting point, that I start by giving the measures. And then, of course, I take all that evidence-based kind of research and information, and I couple it with the story that the kiddo or teen, in your case, the middle schooler that you're kind of posing that question to, I ask them questions. I get to know them and their history and the families, and sometimes even the larger the schools. So we get multiple perspectives about what's going on with the kid. The reality is, for many kids, anxiety and depression, actually I should say, for many humans, anxiety and depression are best friends. They spend a lot of time together. And ADHD or neurodiversity is just kind of woven in there, sometimes in a sneaky way. And so it is really hard to figure out what is specifically going on. Where I get less caught up is that if I can come up with a game plan and a treatment plan that supports that kid, that makes whatever's going on, maybe a little bit of both, maybe a little bit of all three, maybe it's really more focused in one lane. If I can take what I know to be true clinically and give them skills and kind of coping measures and build a plan, a treatment plan that supports them and helps them get better, I get less lost in, am I treating depression? Am I treating anxiety? Am I treating ADHD? I am treating a kid who is struggling. I am treating somebody who has a hard time with executive functioning skills. I'm treating somebody who might get paralyzed in social situations or has a hard time facing tests. And I'm treating somebody who maybe feels really down on themselves and has negative self-talk. That's what I'm treating.
Yeah, the perfectionist and anxiety thing is something we hear a lot right now. If a higher achieving professional comes to you and says they're really struggling with this perfectionist anxiety combination, what are common interventions that you've seen help?
Yeah. So going back to what we were talking about earlier with anxiety, is it's learning to face your fear. And so even with perfectionism, it is actually teaching people to make mistakes, and that the worst case scenario that they think is going to happen, as we were saying earlier, even homelessness or that they're going to get fired, doesn't happen. So if I give an example, let's say I'm working with a high achieving professional, top of their game, part of the executive team of some big company. And they come to me and they're like, I think I'm becoming kind of paralyzed by my anxiety and my perfectionism. Common things I hear, I'm tethered to my desk. I can't stop looking at my computer. Every time I get up, I feel a lot like a rush of anxiety. I wake up with what I call the zings, right? I'm like, zing, I'm awake. And I have to get working, ruminating or perseverating on things that I've done. Did I do that? What if I did this? What should I have done that? Well, what about, maybe I spelled that wrong. Did I say that wrong? Right? All of those kind of pieces are happening. And so what I will say to them is, let's practice maybe not doing the things that you're doing that's reinforcing that you have to be that perfect. Let's practice getting up from your desk and setting a timer for 2 minutes and seeing if you can tolerate it. Many of them will tell me they cannot.
I love how small you start.
Yes. And so I really think about it as this baby step approach of facing the discomfort. And so for perfectionism, it's very similar in that, what are the things where do you see the perfectionism come up for you? Where do you live in your head? Where do you ruminate? And let's start to undo those. And then we ask, we kind of check in and we ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how anxiety provoking would it be to get up from your desk and not look at your email for 2 minutes? A 9, right? You're like, wow, that is really anxiety provoking for you. So let's do it for 1 minute. Let's get up for 1 minute and not look at it. You don't even have to silence it. It can still bing at you, but you have to get up and look away for 1 minute. And it sounds trivial, but it's not. And those baby steps, it's like a snowball. It starts to build and grow. And then we feel more confident in facing those things that are perfectionistic for ourselves.
Yeah, I absolutely love that point of view because, you're not trivializing it, because it may sound ridiculous to some people, but it's a very real fear for some people.
It is very real.
That they're going to miss something and lose their job. And the common advice I hear is, oh, you need a vacation. And it's like, you should take a 2-week Caribbean vacation to get over this. And that's not what you're suggesting. You're suggesting going slow to go fast.
Yes. And actually doing something like taking a 2-week vacation has what I call the boomerang effect. It can make things much, much worse, because then you're told, relax. You just need to relax. It reminds me of a great kid's book called Grumpy Monkey. Have you read this book?
I have.
Fantastic.
Very long time ago. But yes.
Fantastic. There's a whole series now. I love them so much. I wish I would have written them. They are so good. But it's essentially saying, like, you're supposed to feel this way. When you're going to go on vacation and you're going to feel better and you're not going to feel stressed at all and you're going to be relaxed and you're going to have a great time and like soak it up. And the whole time it's like, I'm relaxed. I feel great. I'm supposed to feel great. I'm not anxious. It just makes things worse and harder. And then you come back and you actually feel worse than you did before you left.
Because you should, which is like the worst word in the human.
Totally.
You
should be careful and relax and feel great now. Yeah. And you're like, I don't. And I feel worse. And now my email has 9 million emails that I've missed. And I am even more anxious and more stressed than I was before I left. Going on a vacation, especially for 2 weeks, would be something that I would work towards. That is a lovely idea, but it is not a wonderful reality, especially for perfectionists.
Would you have the same recommendation for a parent? Because I know I see so many students who they're trying to get into Harvard tonight. Yeah. And they're like a freshman in high school. And even the parents are like, this is a lot.
Yeah.
Do you have the same recommendations for them as well, just to start really slow with it? Or is that a different skill set for younger people?
That's a good question. It's a little bit different because one is living the reality, the professional in this case is living the reality of that stress and that anxiety all the time. The high schooler, if you will, trying to get into Harvard is anticipating going to Harvard. I would probably treat it a little bit differently. I don't know that I have a good answer of how I would treat that. I would probably try to scale it back and help them trying to be present in the here and now and not so focused on the future that they're missing what's right in front of them. But that one is a more nuanced answer.
Yeah, it's
a tricky one.
It's hard with younger people too, who especially, and you and I have seen this, right? Where it's once they get into Harvard, if that even happens, it's like great, now what? Now what? And I think that's a dangerous trap that a lot of us fall into.
Yeah. I call those kids and those teens, even to them, right? So that we can have a little humor with it. Because I think humor can be really helpful and therapeutic as well. But the gold star chasers, right? I'm like, what's the gold star that you're trying to chase now? And they're like, I want to be president of my class. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Why? How is that helpful to you? Why do you want that for yourself? And if the answer is intrinsically motivated of like, I've always just wanted to be that and I want to prove to myself that I can do it. And it's just important to me that I know that like deep down, if I really buckle down that I can do this, fantastic. Go for the gusto. But if it's like, I don't know, I just want to be first in my class so then I can get into Harvard. That makes me more nervous. That is an external motivator that Harvard still may not happen, even if you were the top of your class, even if you get that gold star. And so then there's a lot of disappointment that comes with it that's outside of your control. So that kind of goes back to the question you were asking of how would I treat this freshman in high school who's looking to go to Harvard? I help them understand why and what their goals are for. Are they for you or are they for something else? And so I would work with them and help them kind of see why this is so important to them right out of the gate.
I want to go back to snowplow parenting because it's a big deal right now. And it robs a lot of our students the chance to build these executive function skills. Are there any other insights you have with that type of parenting that would be helpful to share?
You know, I think that snowplow parenting, as I said before, comes with really good intentions. The parents that are, if they categorize themselves, right, if we stick with that term of snowplow parenting, that they are snowplowing, they are doing it out of a desire to be helpful and kind and supportive. And one of the things that seems like such an easy pivot, but is so often missed, is to ask your students, your kids, your teens, your college students, what they want and their goals. And some of that I think happens because as parents, we have crafted their world when they're little and we have made all the decisions for them. But as they get older, it's important that we start to ask about what they want, what they need, what their desires are, instead of making assumptions. And again, those assumptions are with good intentions. But I would encourage, if you are listening to this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a snowplow parent, that one, it's not a bad thing. It's not a terrible thing that you're a snowplow parent. It's from a good place, but that you can pivot a little bit and that you could start asking with intention, what does my child or kid or teen or college student need? What do you want? What are you hoping for out of life? And really listen to those answers. Because what I find is that our assumptions, myself included as parents, doesn't always hit the mark, and that we could just tweak a little bit and really actually feel more supported to our kids if we listen to what they want.
I think back to myself when my daughter was 3. Every time she tried to zip up her coat, it was such a mess. She couldn't figure out, and I would it was painful for me to watch,
Yes.
and I just wanted to jump in.
Yes.
And eventually I had to calm myself because it was my issue. It wasn't hers.
That's right.
She was just trying to figure it out.
That's right.
And I loved her, and I still do love her so much that I don't want to see her in pain, but she was fine. It was my issue. It wasn't hers.
That's right. And that happens a lot, especially when we think about the trajectory of our kids and our teens. I'll give a personal example. I have 2 kids myself, and my daughter is really starting to want to do her own hair. It's a silly example, but it's very honest, that she wants to do her own hair and it looks like a hot mess and it drives me insane. I can't stand it. But I'm thinking about, the social complexities of going to school with messy hair and looking like that. And I'm thinking about what other kids are going to say. And is she a reflection of me and our family and all these things? She just wants to learn to do her own hair.
Yeah.
And I caught myself, luckily enough, it took me longer than I'd like to admit, but I caught myself and said, honey, are you just really wanting to do your own hair? And she said, I think I can do it. And I said, I think you can too. Can I give you some strategies and some ways to do it? And she said, no.
Of course, right?
And I was like, okay. And I decided to live with it. It was hard. It wasn't a great moment, but I said, okay, I'm going to let you do it. But if we're going someplace as a family and I need you to be ready for the day, is how I framed it, then can I help you on those rare occasions? And she said yes.
Yeah. It's just clear expectations while giving her the independence.
Yes.
And are there a bunch of families talking about you behind the scenes about your child with messy hair?
Hopefully not, but if they are, then I hope that they're seeing the good intentions too of she's clearly got, her independence here. Yep, that's one way that she can start to feel confident in who she is. If I clip her wings and I do her hair until she's 95, I'm not helping her, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot about the high school parent here because our kids start to pull away from us in some ways.
Well, they individuate as they should.
As they should. It's healthy.
Yes.
How do you recommend they go about these conversations with making sure we're not pushing them towards university if they want to do a trade or something? Because again, it's all out of love and good intentions.
Yeah. One of the things that I do is usually I tie it to some sort of transition within the kid or student's life already. So the beginning of the year is a great time to do it, the beginning of the school year, or you could do it at the beginning of the calendar year, but you tie it to something else. So I would frame up it. And again, it doesn't matter if your kid is crushing it academically or not. Pretty much any kid. The conversation would start with hey, honey, or hey, buddy, I've been thinking about that we are going to start a new school year or that a new year is happening. And that made me think about what you need from me for this year. What do you think you need? Where do you think that you're crushing it? Where do you think you need support? How can I be in your corner? All of those questions allow the child or teen or whoever, young adult, to have a say in what they are looking for from their support system. And what I find where there's friction often, especially I would say early teen years, 14, 15, is when the teen or early teen wants independence but doesn't execute well, right? It also comes back to executive functioning.
We see that all the time.
All the time.
Yep.
Right? I got it. I don't need you to check my homework, but you have all Fs because you don't turn anything in, right? That is a problem. So those conversations, I would say at the beginning of the year, whenever you can find a transition point. It could even be winter break or spring break, right? You could kind of look for the transition point and say, I feel like you're ready. You're looking for some more independence. You want to check your grades all on your own. Yeah, great. How can I help you be successful in doing that? I don't know is 99% of the time the answer, right? I don't know. So then as a parent with a fully functioned frontal lobe, I think through, well, would it be helpful if we check your grades online on Mondays, not on Fridays, because then the weekend's going to suck because we're going to fight all weekend, but on Mondays or on Sundays. So we have a window that we could work on some things, right? Should we check your grades on Sundays? Well, no, I got it. Okay, let's do it your way. Let's have an experiment. I trust you. I want you to get there. You got this, buddy. So you're going to take care of this for 2 weeks. And then at the end of 2 weeks, I'm just going to check in. I'm going to look at your grades. And if you're crushing it, rock on. And if you're not, I'm here to support you. And then we'll come up with a plan of what support looks like. But that tying it to a transition, not like, hey, I've seen that your grades are terrible. We've got to sit down. We've got to figure this out. It approaches it with like an open stance of like, I'm in your corner. I got your back. How can I do that in a way that you're going to receive it?
Yeah, I like a lot. And I like a lot the clear expectations as well, because that's what we've seen work a lot is there's clear expectations there. It's like, you got this for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
However, if you have more than 3 missing assignments or failing more than 2 classes, or whatever that is, then X is going to happen. The clear expectations, I think,
huge.
What you spoke to is everything here.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of internal work, I'd imagine, from the parent to be okay with biting their tongue for 2 weeks.
Yes, absolutely. But I think, as Brene Brown said, clear is kind. It is. Clear is kind. And so when you can have clear expectations, I will say oftentimes to a high achieving, really smart, gifted kiddo that has executive functioning challenges, I will say to that family, write a contract. And I mean it, because that kid will negotiate their way out of all of these different things. But having clear expectations and a clear understanding of what support looks like is key to also stopping the power struggles that go on at home.
Love it. Ali, I'm a huge fan of your work. Where can people learn more about you?
So they can go to my website, which is Schroer Counseling and Consulting, or the corporate side is Mental Scope Consulting, but both do mental health and well-being for the individual and for the collective good of society.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on the Executive Function for All podcast. If today's episode brought you any value, please rate us 5 stars and share it with someone who may benefit. And remember, every small step you take builds towards your success. For resources and guidance, visit untappedlearning.com. Keep growing, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.